Okay, I'd like to call the regular school committee meeting to order. Today we are conducting superintendent interviews. This is the second day that we've conducted interviews. Last Wednesday evening we interviewed 3 candidates, and tonight we have 3 more candidates, 6 very qualified individuals that we wanted the opportunity to meet and ask questions. And I hope I say your name right. You've said it for me twice, Mr. Badalament. It's great to have you here. We're impressed with your resume, and we wanted the opportunity to meet with you and, as I said, ask you some questions. My name is Ted Bettencourt, Mayor of the city. You've had the opportunity to meet our school committee members. We are all elected by the public, and it's our responsibility to name as a committee the next superintendent. And as I said, very nice to have you here with us. I wanted to give you the opportunity to make a brief statement, 1 or 2 minutes, and then we are going to go around and ask questions of you. Mr. Hockman?
May we just start our meeting as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, great, excellent. If everybody could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Mr. Hockman.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I also wanted to mention that we have our Ward 1 counselor here, John Turco. Mr. Turco, thank you for being here. So when you're going to speak, we just need you to hit the button. Yep, and then we'll be ready to go. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for having me here. I'm truly happy to be here today and have the opportunity to potentially serve the students of Peabody. I've been known for being passionate for seeing every one of my students succeed. I believe that next to ensuring the safety of students and staff, the most important thing a school leader does is focus on students' academic achievement and their well-being. What I believe is important for improving schools aligns extremely well with what the Peabody school system values, or what I can gather the school system values from people I've spoken to and everything I've read. I believe the superintendent should be an active instructional leader, working with the principals to improve teaching and learning in their schools. I know what student engagement and excellent teaching looks like, as I'm an avid student of these subjects, as well as of the new supervision and evaluation process. My expertise in these areas led me to be asked to train the entire senior administrative team for Concord and Concord Carlisle on how to conduct effective learning walks and how to support teachers in improving their practice. Another example of this, of the importance that Peabody places, another example of this alignment is the importance Peabody places on adult learning. In my school leadership roles, I strive to model what it means to be a learner for the whole school community. I've developed an extensive personal network with educators from around the country and around the globe. Sharing ideas and articles forwarded to me by national and international colleagues is one way in which I connect with teachers in the schools I've worked in. When students see adults get excited about new ideas, it makes the importance of continuous personal growth real for them. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I believe that in order for a school system to be successful, there needs to be a climate of trust. Trust is not an abstract concept that you talk about. It's built on doing real work together in the service of students. As superintendent of the Peabody schools, it'll be my job to make sure there's active collaboration between the city and the schools, the principals and the teachers and the students. And I'm ready to answer your questions when you're ready to ask them.
Excellent. And I'm going to start off with the first question. Right now, as a committee, we're really starting to get into our budget for this coming year. And really, it's a year-long process, but certainly now we turn our attention and really delve into some of these important decisions and issues. Yeah, sorry, the phone's a little... And I wanted to know if you could just please maybe touch on some of your budget experience, some of the difficult decisions that have had to be made in your career in terms of budget restraints, and maybe just talk a little bit about your background. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In my experience, what I've been asked to do every year as a building principal for 15 years in the 3 districts I've worked in, but particularly in the last 9 that I was serving at Concord Carlisle, is basically to prepare 3 budget scenarios for the superintendent enhanced, level service, and level funded. And I know the school committee knows all too well, but for people who are listening or in level funded over there, is we have a student here today, that's great. Level funded is cuts, and that is an unenviable situation to be in, but it happens and it's a fiscal reality. It is necessary. Long and short of it, just to, should I wait, or we get the, yeah, that'd be the feedback. Keep going? Yes. Okay, great. But I have experience working with my superintendent. I have experience presenting the budget to school committees. We're a regional school committee at Concord Carlisle. And I have attended FinComs and Board of Selectmen meetings. I've been at the town basis. I have not, to be clear, I have not presented to Selectmen and FinComs before, but I've been there for the, I won't just say moral support, but occasionally the go-to answer on the educational programming that backs up a budget item. I have presented to the MSBA. It was a big ticket item. I don't mean to be glib. I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's not a, and for another day, I'll tell you the story about my 7th grade science teacher who's on the MSBA, and when I had to present to my 7th grade science teacher. So I think it's, but I think the key thing is, and I'll wrap this up by saying that in terms of, I'm looking down at some of the bullet points on the question, defending it to the municipality. I think it goes back to what I said a moment ago about trust. And it has to, again, it's not just some abstract thing. You have to, when you're, the entire budgeting process from building the budget, that's tough. I wonder if my phone's in my pocket. It's off. Oh, I think, thank you. I think someone, in any event, maybe I'll sit farther back. I have a loud voice too. Okay, all right. I'm glad that's, my watch is analog, so that's not doing it. In any event, there has, I'll sum it up, transparency. People have to, they're going to trust you if you're being as transparent as you can possibly be and if you're being a good steward of their monies. I'll wrap that up. Okay.
I apologize, we're just trying, there's a bad echo, and I'm just trying to see if I could
Thank you.
make some corrections to that.
Thank you.
Did you ask? Okay. Turn it over to you, Mr. Rosignol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome.
Thank you.
Minus the technical difficulties, we'll still muddle through.
Sure.
So my first question is why Peabody? What brought you to our district? What strengths do you see in our district?
In terms of a few people I've spoken to, including one of my former colleagues, recently former colleagues, who lives in Peabody, and all the data that I've drilled down on from the Department of Education website and the newspaper articles I've read, Peabody has there's a real sense of community, and not a lot of communities still have that, and I value that. I live in Framingham, and I value the sense of community that Framingham has as a town, and I think from what I can gather, Peabody has that, and that's what attracts me to Peabody in general. I also think that that the school system has a number of significant strengths. I think some of them include the sound fiscal management that this committee has exercised and that the city has exercised over the course of the past few years. What I can gather from again, this is from DESI data, obtaining great outcomes for, and this sounds like, I'm not one of these widget people who believes that that every single thing that happens in the classroom is based on dollars spent, but you do have to think in these terms, especially being on the committee. But I think that in terms of the per pupil costs and the outcomes that you're achieving, that's noteworthy. And there's a number of other elements to that too, but that's why.
Thank you. The Every Student Success Act, can you elaborate on that? Can you explain your thoughts on it and where you see that taking us?
In terms of the reauthorization of the ESEA?
Correct.
Yeah. I actually think that the state of Massachusetts made a very good decision in terms of the accountability component of things. District determined measures, DDMs, which have become sort of the bane of some people's existence, actually is not a bad thing. Some states went and bought grade level tests right off the shelf, and a relative of mine is an elementary school teacher in Florida, and if you don't pass the third, I think it's called the FCAT and not the MCAS. If you don't, she teaches third grade, and if you don't pass that grade level test, you do not go to the fourth grade. My point being is that district determined measures are just that. The state of Massachusetts entrusted the cities and towns and the school districts to know what works for their kids. And I think it's actually a reasonable means of assessing student progress. And you of course still need the MCAS data. You can't ignore it. It's standards based, and it gives you and other data as well from the College Board, SATs, AP scores. You know, there's some nationally benchmarked data. But I think district determined measures in terms of accountability make sense. They really do, and it beats the alternative. So that's one thought on ESEA. I was involved at the national level doing direct lobbying with congresspeople and their staffs for ESEA reauthorization over a period of about 4 years. I went down to Washington for Hill Days and interacted with, in some cases, the congressional member themselves when we were fortunate enough to get in to see the person, or more often than not with their chief of staff or with one of their legislative assistants. I can't say I have a line item working knowledge of ESEA, because I'm probably about that big, maybe bigger. But I'm pretty familiar with most of the general concepts.
One last question from me, and I'll yield to my counterparts. What experience, if any, do you have with grants and grant writing?
Mostly local and state, and I would go with most, it kind of goes in that order. Local, some state, and some federal. Mainly in terms of, in all the communities I've worked in, there have been terrific education foundations and sundry other groups that provided grant funding to the school system. And I have a good deal of experience there. I had to put together safe and drug-free schools grants in terms of when those existed. Those are few and far between, if not entirely eliminated, pardon my ignorance, but I haven't had to do one of those for a long time, so my guess is it was eliminated altogether. I'm not really looking for the answer, but I'll just look around. But I haven't had to manage the grants. That's usually a responsibility left to the assistant superintendent in most of the districts I've worked in. As a building principal, I wasn't responsible for managing those grants, but I frequently had to provide the data and the narratives for getting the grants, and then being accountable for spending those grant monies out of my building.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Rosignol. Mr. Amico?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome. Thank you for coming, and good luck. Instructional methods. Could you please describe to us your understanding of the most effective strategies for teaching? We held a community forum a couple of weeks ago, and we had teachers present here, and many of them had mentioned that they'd like to have a superintendent who knows the newest and possibly the best instructional methods. If you could just elaborate on that.
It's interesting. Thank you for the question. It's interesting you ask it, because a moment ago when I was speaking to Mr. Kuchar, and well, he might have stepped out of the room. The MASC search consultant you've been working with, I said I was trained as an instructional leader. I went into school leadership because I love teaching, and so it's teacher, leader, leader, teacher, and I think those work together. I am It's not time to be humble, so I'll just say it. I'm an expert in supervision and evaluations, the supervision and evaluation system the state put into place a few years ago. And that tells you what good teaching looks like. Now, I understand that teaching is not all science, far from it, but we do have 40 years of educational research that we stand on. It's a blend of art and science, and you need to understand, you need to be able to hold both of those things. But what the new supervision evaluation system does is it provides you with rubrics. There are 34 elements, four standards that break down into about 34 elements. And the proficient level, if you look at the box, just like when we give students rubrics in the classroom, it paints the target of what you're shooting for. The bottom line, though, to sum it all up, is student engagement. It's the number one thing that I observe for when I'm in the classroom. And I went through some trainings a few years ago around what's known as instructional rounds. Dick Elmore out of Harvard put this together. And one of the most interesting things you do when you're doing instructional rounds, this is when you're doing learning walks, and this is what I would do as a superintendent. I would work with the principals. You go through classrooms. You have the opportunity to talk to teachers in the hallways. Or next time you run into them, you make the point of finding that teacher and say, hey, I was only there for 5, 10, 15 minutes. What came before? That was really interesting. And what came after that? You need to follow up on those things. You don't want to just go blowing through all the time. But you talk to students. You literally grab a student in the back of the class and say, what are you doing? And then ask them why they're doing it. And that's information. And some students, some students can tell you verse and chapter why they're doing something. Oh, this fits in with the unit we did. I had a 7th grade science student tell me this. Oh, it fits in with the unit we did last week, and here's what we're doing next week, and it all makes sense. Other times students will look at you and say, I have no idea. And that's not an indictment of the teacher, far from it. It's just that that's something you can work with the teacher on around, outline for the students why it's important that they know the stuff they already know and where it's going. So I believe that the superintendent's job is to be the instructional leader for the district.
Thank you. Mr. Olympio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Could you explain a little bit about your experience in dealing with special education and specifically the budget as it pertains to special education in district versus non-district students?
Thank you for the question. I am somebody who's prided himself on being, well, let me go with this. I am somebody who knows special education well. I was a special education teacher for a brief period of time early in my career. In fact, it was almost like high altitude training. One of my first teaching jobs as an English teacher was working at a therapeutic day school. And when you explain something 3 ways and the student still doesn't get it, and you've got to come up with a 4th and a 5th way to explain it, that really pushes you as a young teacher or as any age teacher. So I know it from the classroom. I also know it in terms of program development. I've built a number of programs over the years with the talented people I worked with. We recently put together a post-hospitalization program, which really morphed into a pre-hospitalization program so that students, it was designed for that when students were coming back from psychiatric hospitalizations and they needed a compressed day and they needed support services during the course of the day, that's what the program was there for. But more often than not, students with social and emotional challenges with mental health or mental health concerns were able to access that program, and thereby we were able to reduce our out-of-district placement costs for therapeutic day schools in particular. I built the program because it helped kids, first and foremost. It was nice that it also helped reduce some of our out-of-district placement costs. I believe that you build alliances with families and that you get kids what they need. If the student, yes, you have to be mindful of costs, but you also have to, so in some cases, the student needs, the out-of-district placement seems to be the touchstone that most, certainly as a school committee, you're very familiar with. It's appropriate. Sometimes that's what the kid needs and that's what the student should get to meet their needs. There are other times when it's not, and that's what the BSEA is there for. And that's a time when you say to parents, it's okay to go to hearing. And provided you, on your end of things, if as a school system, if you've done your the due diligence, and you've legitimately tried to meet that kid's needs every way that you can, but you still have another effort that you want to make before not a district placement, that's a good reason to go to hearing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Limpio. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. My question is with collective bargaining, and I'd like you to tell us about your experience with it, how you see the bargaining process working. If you don't have experience with it, what your vision is in regards to collective bargaining, you know, with the teachers and how it will impact students and what your goals would be.
My goal I would say my primary goal would be to keep it drama-free as much as possible. It can be a very emotional process, and rightly so. You're talking about time and money, and those are things that people can get charged about. But I think that in my experience over the years, that's the number one thing you can do. This might be one of my shorter answers. I have very little direct experience with doing the bargaining. I've actually not sat at the table. As a building principal, I was not in on the negotiations between the school committee, the superintendent, and the teachers' unions, or the other unions for that matter. However, I did spend a great deal of time preparing what I would just describe as management's positions, if you will. In other words, here's the things that we would like to see happen. And as a building principal, these are the things I'd like to see change. These are the things I can live with. So I'm used to identifying what the talking points, if you will, for the negotiations would look like. One of the things I found intriguing was interest-based bargaining. I think that was something that our district didn't implement it on the last go-around. It was discussed, but that didn't end up happening. But I found, the more I read up on it, the more I found that it could prove to be a process that, if you go back to my central goal of keeping it as drama-free as possible, that could be, it has potential to reduce that, certainly. And in terms of not wanting it to impact students, clearly whatever happens, you don't want to have any impact on the students in any way, shape, or form. In fact, if all goes well, they're blissfully unaware that any such thing is happening in the district. And it's not that the more astute ones among them might want to know, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You are the only candidate before us that is not currently engaged with a school district. It looks like you spent about 9 years as principal at Concord Carlisle High School, and your contract expired in 2016 at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
Can you explain, if you know, why Concord Carlisle chose not to renew your contract, or why you chose to separate from them?
It was the latter. I chose not to renew or to engage. This is going to sound glib, but I'll just say it anyway. Seinfeld had 9 seasons and decided to go out on top, so that's how I looked at it. And I've been in education for 28 years, school leadership positions for 19, and school principalships for 15. And I was doing work with, and still am, with a national educational leadership group called ASCD, the one that I did the face-to-face lobbying with in Washington. And I basically looked at this year of being a consultant as more of a sabbatical, that such things don't exist for principals. They don't exist in school leadership positions. But I did it to try some different things, and it's been a great year. It's still a great year. But I'm not done. I still have a number of years left that I want to serve students. And I think that it's a natural extension. That one of the reasons I went into school leadership out of the classroom was because there were certain things there are certain ways I couldn't help kids in the classroom, and by becoming an assistant principal and subsequently a principal, it provided me with more resources to help kids. A good friend of mine who's a superintendent right now said that you're next to the school committee, you're at the level at which you can direct whole programs and whole schools within the district to help kids and more kids and in broader ways. So that's what's appealing to me about returning to it.
It's interesting that you made a Seinfeld reference, as our next candidate is named John O'Terry, who was a cameraman for Seinfeld, a different John O'Terry. We'll talk about that at the next interview. You described yourself as an expert in teacher leadership, I think. Is that fair?
In supervision and evaluation, and I'd like to think I'm an instructional leader, and I'd say I'm an expert in supervision and evaluation in Massachusetts.
So in 2015, looks like you took a little bit of heat from the Concord-Carlisle School Committee with regard to a survey that was performed.
Yeah,
And in that,
Mass tells.
and in that survey, teachers showed a drop of 46 to 26% compared to the year prior in terms of teachers are relied upon to make decisions about educational issues, and a drop from 43 to 26% in another area of teacher leadership in the school takes steps to solve problems. Can you explain how your expertise didn't translate into your staff?
I'd welcome you to call the Concord-Carlisle Teachers Association directly, and I think they would be able to provide you better context for some of that. And I can give you a name and a number if you're interested when we finish here. I don't want to do it on public access TV. The short version is that I accept responsibility for everything that happened on my watch. I don't try to point fingers or shirk responsibility in any way, shape, or form. I do believe that the TELMAS survey, sometimes called Mass Tells, TELMAS, I do believe there was a tremendous amount of politicking, if you will, around the implementation and then subsequently how the results were used in our district in the give and take between leadership, of which I was a part of. Again, that's part of me, it was part of that picture. But it was challenging, and I don't mean to be vague. I can't directly address the numbers you cited, but if you're interested, you could talk to the Teachers Association, and I would hope you would also talk to my former superintendent as well. You'd have the full story, if you will.
Thank you, and I may take you up on that.
Sure.
A few other areas, if I may, to
Sure.
inquire. And I couldn't find the result of this, and I thought it was an interesting issue regarding, and I realized you work for a regional school district, so it's different than how we operate as one city.
Right.
You had two different municipalities that you were dealing with, and two different, I think there were town managers in each, and there was it looks like in 2015 there was looking for a budget override, and there was some public resources used to, not a budget override, but to approve the school department's budget in each of the municipalities, and there were some public resources used to lobby with the electorate to approve the budget. And I couldn't find a result from the Ethics Commission. It looked like someone lodged an inquiry. I don't know.
That was one that, yes, I'm aware of it. When as you're saying it, I'm like aware of that there was an issue of some kind, but frankly, I have no idea what came of it, what generated it, or what happened.
I couldn't find the result either.
Blissfully ignorant, but that's
it looked like it may have just been a rogue resident. I don't know. I couldn't find much about it. I thought you might enlighten me.
I can't fill you in.
I'll get to two bigger issues. Isabella Hankey. There was a student who attended Concord-Carlisle,
Sure.
and I don't know. I don't really want to go into all the particulars unless you do.
No, I don't, but I can give you an overview.
Well, actually, I'm not sure. I want to know. You can respond any way you'd like.
Sure.
But what I'm going to ask you is, what did you learn, if anything, from the Isabella Hankey?
What I learned from the lawsuit that was lodged against the district, in which I was personally named, as well as the superintendent, obviously the district and the town itself, was that what I've known all along, and that is that you can sue anybody you want for any reason you want to. Now, and ultimately, we prevailed. It was dismissed on summary judgment. But lawsuits have a way of weaving their way forward, whether you like it or not. What I learned was that when I assumed responsibility for what needed to happen to help make that student feel safe or safer, even though I was subsequently named in the lawsuit, the shortest possible version is that an unknown assailant, it wasn't a bullying lawsuit, it was mischaracterized and we were tried in the press. An unknown assailant made her life terrible. Miserable would be an understatement. And missteps were made. That was with somebody who was one of my subordinates, and I accept responsibility for that. And when I directly started managing the situation for the student, it stopped. And the parents and student ultimately decided to still sue us, and they did, and the suit was dismissed. So I didn't really answer what I learned, other than it kind of goes back to the lesson in leadership I've now cited twice, and that is, if it happened on your watch, you own it.
I will agree with you that this was not a lawsuit over bullying. It was a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and
Right.
a bunch of other stuff that took place. I'm not sure that there was a policy for bullying in Concord Carlisle.
A what?
A policy regarding bullying at Concord Carlisle at the time.
We were in complete alignment with the state's bullying legislation, and we had it in our handbook.
In reading, and I will agree with you also that the defendants succeeded at summary judgment. And in reading through Judge Talwani's order on the summary judgment motion, she does make particular findings regarding Assistant Principal Weinstein, who was under your direct supervision, shredding or destroying records that didn't become available at some point. There's some conversation about how long it took you to respond to the to Ms. Hankey's mother when she called in particular times, and other things that make me a little uncomfortable as far as how I would want a superintendent to act. And that's why I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak on it. And if you wish to further respond, I'll reserve my next question.
Then I'll keep this answer short. There was a lot of things that are patently untrue and not factual in the summary judgment. As far as the, yes, I'll leave it at that.
And that's fair enough. I mean, I practice law and I understand pleadings and things like that, so that's fair enough. So the last area I'd like to question you about is if you had to do September 11, 2013 over, I mean, I'm sure you had to expect that this was going to come up.
I'm glad it is. I really appreciate it, because my Google hits don't look so good, do they?
Yeah, they don't. There's a lot written about you. So
It doesn't matter. 28 years of great work, and
that's
how it goes.
the world. And you are very active on social media. I think you have a blog that you operate and things like
blog
that.
and Twitter.
Yeah.
I use Twitter a great deal for professional development.
So if you can tell us, if you had to do September 11, 2013 over again, how you would do it.
I'd have read the poem. I would have read the poem. Now I'll elaborate briefly. My assistant principal approached me and said, I'd like to read a poem on 9/11 remembrance. She had read a poem the year before, done a moment of silence, and then read a poem, and it was fine. So the second year when she proposed doing it, I trusted her and said, go ahead. It was what I learned from that was, much like when the theater director would come to me and say, I want to do this play, I learned to read every line of the play first. And that day I didn't read the poem. I didn't read the poem my assistant principal read. And coincidentally, because it was the first week of school, the student who read the Pledge of Allegiance didn't show up that day. And I can't blame secretaries for not noticing or what. And it was those two things came together, and the next thing I knew, it was the pledge wasn't read, and it was characterized in the media as a Muslim prayer by some, when it was indeed, it came across that way in certain, but it was, and I took my lumps.
Okay,
If I
Mr.
can,
Stockman.
yeah, just one follow-up comment.
Very briefly, yeah, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dunn, turn it to you.
Thank you for the chance to address those. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. My questions are about communications. How would you characterize your communication style? And can you give us any examples or insight into methods of communication that you are experienced with and that you think would be helpful in a district this size?
I would say that as much face-to-face as possible, even in a district this size. It's twice the size of the district between Concord and Concord-Carlisle. It's 4 times the size of the school that I was used to working in, the entire district in terms of the number of students. But I think face-to-face matters, and I think you need to, the adage people before paper matters. My communication style is I'm incredibly open. I'm not really good with state secrets, meaning that you guys probably shouldn't tell me stuff you don't want the teachers to know, and vice versa. They shouldn't tell me stuff they don't want you to know. I'm a good conduit in the best of ways between the groups, and I think people trust me as an honest person, and I think that matters. I think having integrity matters. But the yeah, I think spending time in terms of communication, the people you need to be communicating with a lot are the students. Because as a school leader, your day can get wrapped up in adult world all day. And if you're not spending time talking to your chief, the most important people in the schools, students, then you're missing the boat. So I think it's important to keep those lines of communication open. And I don't just mean with the student council president. I found a way to make sure that students of all kinds of students were actively involved in the life of the school, and I'd like to see the same thing at the district level as well. I think it's important to find out what's working for them, what's not working for them, and that should influence, well, certainly at your level, policy decisions that are made, budgetary decisions that are made. And I don't mean just having a plebiscite and asking a few kids in the cafeteria to vote on whether they like a new textbook or not, but you might want to find out whether it's working. But I think my communication style is open. I think I would leave it at that. I'm not a closed door guy, and I'm not somebody who spends all of his time in his office. I like to spend time talking to people. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. I have a couple of further questions I wanted to ask. I want to talk about vision for Peabody and what you see as steps we can take to improve our district. We are a level 3 district, even though I really strongly feel that doesn't really categorize the great work that's taking place in our city with our teachers and our principals who do an excellent job for us. But we are a level 3, and we, of course, want to improve upon that, like every district, of course, wants to. But I wanted to ask about, can you touch on your experience and have you dealt with improving your specific schools that you've worked at? Maybe explain if you have made an improvement in that grade. And just talk a little bit about what you see as a vision for Peabody.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was something I cut short in my opening statement because I wanted to leave as much time as possible, especially also given the technical difficulties, and you have other candidates coming in this evening. But I will read something and then I'll try to say a few more words about it. I have led successful school-wide efforts to develop effective classroom-based strategies to close achievement gaps for students of color and for high-need students. We saw these sub-cohorts' performance improve in measurable ways. Our African American and Latino students showed an overall sustained increase of 0.1 to 0.2 in their GPAs over a 2-year period. That might not sound like a lot, but when we were looking at GPAs longitudinally over a 10-year period, there was a 0.7 gap in GPAs, whereas a Concord or Carlisle resident student had a 3.4. Our average Boston student was clocking it at a 2.7 GPA. And that remained undented for a long period of time. And one of the things that we did was we looked at our personnel. We were able to reorganize some of our resources to do a direct instructional strategies approach so that kids could learn how to learn. We spent a lot of time on that as opposed to just helping students with their homework through tutorials. We spent time giving them direct instruction in how to do school, if you will, how to be more effective learners, and it paid off. It was starting to pay off over a 2-year period. It's not enough to plant your flag on. You'd like to see that over a longer period of time, but it was a good start. We also saw a 10-point student growth percentile increase as measured on the MCAS in our special education population in math. And again, a lot of that came down to more work. A lot of it comes down to investing time, energy, and some financial resources, although not a significant amount, in supporting teachers in developing their own background and expertise in working with the students. So in professional development, that paid off. One other strategy that we employed with some of our students was particularly for our students of color in Concord, and if we were a Metco school, so 6% of our student population came from Boston, and in a classroom of 25 students, you might be the only person from Boston, maybe 2. And what we did was, instead of taking all of our Boston freshmen and putting them into 10 different sections of earth science, we clustered them in 3, so that you had 3 or 4 students in one of 3 sections. We were better able to coordinate with those 3 teachers as opposed to trying to coordinate with 10 teachers. These are some, I don't know if that's too granular for you, but these are some strategies that were effective in terms of closing some long-term or persistent achievement gaps that we saw. The difficulty with the state's leveling system is that if one of your sub-cohorts doesn't reach its target, that can bump your school down an entire level. And I know that 9 of the 10 schools are level 2 schools, and that 1 school is level 3. I didn't drill down on the high schools what the sub-cohort's performances were, and I don't think that's relevant for this conversation, for this interview process necessarily, but that's the type of information that can be very helpful in terms of aligning your resources.
Good, thank you. And to kind of follow up on that, if you were to be superintendent, how would you judge improvement? And after 1 year, what would you be looking to attain? And after 2 years, and maybe after 3 years, what would be the kind of the way to ascertain the improvements? And how would you look to make improvements? And how would you judge those?
Well, the vast majority of it would be quantitative. You look at the numbers. You've got to look at this. You've got to look at the state numbers, which includes everything in terms of MCAS performance, the district determined measures. You need to look at the College Board's data in terms of SATs, APs, and the College Board's done an interesting thing with the Advanced Placement Program. It's not just how many of your students got 1 through 5 on a given set of tests. They have a number of different metrics that are helpful in terms of thinking about participation in those programs. And by the way, APs are not the be-all and end-all. I was a former AP teacher, and I do think that it's a good program and that you should actively pursue it, but it's not an end unto itself. That's just sort of a side note. But I think the other piece that's missing is the qualitative data. And you can get qualitative data as much as you can get quantitative data. And qualitative is the stories. You need to in a school system of this size, And even within a single school, it's oftentimes very difficult to know all of the great things that are happening. And my job as a superintendent would be to capture all of the great things that are going on in the schools and let people know about them. Oftentimes schools, as much as they try and make every effort to do so, to let the community know the great things that are happening with students, it's difficult. And I think social media plays a part in that. I do think that Twitter, for instance, can play I know a number of principals and superintendents have used it very effectively to promote their districts. And it's not so much, it's to promote it within the community that the schools are in. It's not so much for a national audience or for their self-aggrandizement. It's really to let the townspeople know that there's great, and not so much towns in this city, in this case, know what great things are happening in the schools. So it's the numbers and it's the stories, and you need both.
Good answer. Being in a leadership position, you're going to be faced with some challenges and some difficult moments. And Mr. Hockman asked about a couple of those. I think everybody who's in leadership is going to have some real tests. Can you maybe talk about another instance where there was a difficult challenge, difficult moment, and how you were able to resolve that issue?
Sure, although I just talked about the most challenging ones in my career, so we've got that off the table, and get that. Those are definitely the two most challenging of actually three. Well, I'll go with this. We started a program at Concord Carl High School called Rivers and Revolutions, which was the best thing I did in 28 years, and I'll go with that. I will plant my flag on that. I'm just going to read a quick thing that I also cut from my opening statement, and I'll tell you why this was so challenging in just a second. While you can see on my resume that I've built numerous programs to support student achievement and their well-being, the one I'm proudest of is the nationally recognized Rivers and Revolutions program. This school within a school incorporates real interdisciplinary teaching, being part of a community of learners and stewardship to their town. But the real payoff was the first Rivers exhibition night when students were giving testimonials. When Nick was handed the microphone, a lot of people held their breath, but what he said was incredibly powerful. He said, "I never woke up wanting to come to school until I was in this program." Now this kid was a second semester senior, and it was sort of, needless to say, it was a ringing indictment of the school system that he had not enjoyed any of school up until the end of his senior year in doing this program. But the fact that I had worked so hard with the teachers who had the creative thought to put this program together, it wasn't so much a difficult decision, it was a difficult process, because getting that program off the ground required thinking about a realignment of resources. It required helping people understand that this program wasn't necessarily a threat to what they were doing on a daily basis, that this program could exist and wasn't a threat to anybody else's program. Because initially when it was proposed and it was something that was new, people didn't know what it was, because of course it was new. So it took a lot of time. I spent a lot of time listening. For instance, gathered up every concern that I could possibly find, and then worked with the faculty and worked with parents as well around helping to understand what this program could be, hearing out those concerns, addressing them as much as it was possible, and it paid off. It's an incredible program. This is its 5th year now. 100 students go through it every year. It hits the entire academic spectrum. We have students with significant special needs, and we have students who are in AP classes. And it's not just a program for any one type of student. And the fact that it works for so many students is a testament to, I think, its effectiveness and the incredible experience kids get out of it.
Excellent. I wanted to see if I wanted to provide you the opportunity to kind of make like a closing statement. Give you a couple minutes to do that. But thank you for answering the questions.
Sure. Well, again, thank you very much for having me in today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to basically answer the questions that you had to ask. They're They're questions that are critical in terms of the chief responsibilities of a superintendent. As you know, I have not served as a superintendent before, but because Concord Carl High School is a regional school district, I've had extensive firsthand experience with the budget development process, working with local municipalities, and managing a large faculty and staff. As the next superintendent, I will work incredibly hard throughout the coming months to get prepared. There's a lot more information, and certainly information I've referenced so far, about the schools and about the city that I would need to know in order to be successful next year. Once July 1 arrives, there are several key tasks that I will accomplish right out of the gate. The first and most important of these is getting to know the people who work with the students every day. And that is not just the teachers. You need to know the support staff. In fact, in one of my buildings, the person who was the go-to person for the students when they were in trouble was the head custodian. And he was an amazing guy who would expedite those concerns to the appropriate person. He didn't try to play guidance counselor. If somebody came to him with a serious, if a student came to him with a serious concern, beyond just a little life advice, he would get that student to the right person. So it's important to know is everybody, if you can, in all of your schools. I believe all of the adults, as I just said, be they faculty members or support personnel, matter in the lives of kids. And in order to do this, I will host informal open houses over the course of the summer so people can come in on their own schedules. The second critical task is to assess what's already working in the schools and where the challenges lie. Needs assessments are important because that information helps you identify your strengths before you undertake new initiatives. Finally, I want to get to know more about the city of Peabody and to connect with people in the community. It's so important for the superintendent to develop good working relationships with both folks in city governance and the business communities as well. It'd be the business community. In closing, I am confident that my 28 years of experience working in schools, 19 of which I spent serving in leadership positions, make me uniquely qualified to serve as the next educational leader of the Peabody schools. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. I'm going to take the paper clip I left. Nice to meet you too. Thank you.
Right, I'd like to call the committee meeting back to order, and I want to take the opportunity to introduce the next candidate to be interviewed for the position of superintendent, Mr. John O'Terry. Mr. O'Terry, it's nice to have you here with us. Appreciated reason. I know we're having a little issue with the microphone a little bit. We've had the opportunity to read your resume, and we wanted, as a group, to have the opportunity to meet you and ask you some questions. My name is Ted Bettencourt, mayor of the city, and you've had the opportunity to meet our school committee members, and I'm going to give you the opportunity, as we discussed, to maybe say a couple of minutes of an opening statement, and then we're going to right away get into asking you a number of questions. And again, it's great to have you here. As you're answering the questions and when you're going to speak, you'll see on the microphone there's that little green button. You can press that when you're ready to speak. Great. Excellent. So why don't I just turn it over to you, and if you wanted to make some opening remarks.
Sure. Okay. Wow, it's loud. Thank you very much for welcoming me here to Peabody. I'm honored, humbled, and excited to stand before you as potentially the next superintendent of schools for Peabody. I am a transformational educational leader who has been the headmaster of Somerville High School for the last 5 years. I took over Somerville High School in 2012 as a level 3 school, and within a year we transformed that into a level 1 school, and we have maintained that for 4 years in a row. The running, not joke, the running tagline with us is we are like the New England Patriots. We have success, excuse me, ethnic hazard with talking with my hands, I apologize. We expect success. We are in pursuit of our 5th ring this year, 5 years of level 1. We did that with a lot of factors that came into play. My leadership style is one that's collaborative and consensus building. We worked and said, this is what we got to do. I was given the task by our superintendent. He said, change it. We're level 3. We don't deserve to be level 3. And I know Peabody High School is in the same boat. Our kids don't deserve that. We have too much of a talented educational force to suffer from this.
I knew one thing we had to do was something different. I know that the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. What do? So we did that in a very strategic way. I led a strategic planning effort over the first year of what our priorities were, worked collaboratively with the superintendent, in turn with the mayor and the school committee of putting our priorities and what we needed in order. I did a lot of communication, frankly, to get that to happen. There is no such thing in my book as over-communication. It's, encouraging. Mainly, it was my philosophy of being student-centered, and when I had done some research on Peabody, I think the first line there is, kids matter, kids come first. I don't see how you run a school district without that as your first priority. That's the way I operate. I said that when I took over as the headmaster. I said, I'm student-centered. And I'd been there for a long time. I said, just like when I was an assistant principal here, I might make decisions that you as educators might not agree with. But there's a reason for it, and I will happily defend that. And I've always been able to defend that, justify it, and get support for it. So it goes back to building consensus. Leadership, to me, educational leadership is not being high-handed, top-down. That's military style. That works on a battlefield. We're not in a battlefield. We are in a professional group of educators working with the public, and leadership there is getting people to join you on that path of common good. And the path of common good is serving our students, raising the level of expectation and achievement, and celebrating that success. When you reach that level, then you start identifying other issues that you'd like to work on to make your school a world-class school, and that's what I'd like to do to the Peabody Public Schools.
Thank you, Mr. O'Terry. I'm going to ask the first question. And
Sure. Do I keep this on, or?
You can turn it off. Yeah, and then, you have to keep clicking it. I'm sorry there's a little bit of an echo. That should go away in a moment. Question I have for you is regarding budget experience. Right now, we're tackling our budget, and I've always felt that it's a year-long endeavor, but really, we're in the thick of it now. We're getting into the thick of it. And always some tough decisions, tough choices need to be made. Can you maybe talk about your budget experience in Somerville or in your past life that you think would be reflective of the type of value you could bring to our city in terms of your experience?
Sure, thank you. That question obviously is important. We've got a large budget as the school. It's the largest portion of the city's budget, and it's important that it be handled in a very professional, thoughtful manner. My budget experience has been one where I believe transparency is critical. Setting priorities and strategically planning. In the position of superintendent, I think that needs to be coordinated with the mayor and the school committee, outlining what our needs are. What I would like to do in building the budget here, much like we've done in Somerville, is I've worked with my leaders in identifying and prioritizing what it is that we need to be successful. I also like to go through an exercise in distinguishing. I have a cousin who's a financial planner, and I've always said I can put you out of business if everyone can understand what the difference is between a want and a need. We all want something, but we have needs. You need to eat. Your want is expressing that through, I chose a steak or I chose a sandwich. So understanding what our wants and needs are. The needs come first. The wants are the next layer of that foundation. That has to be collaborative. It has to be something that we can agree on, but ultimately it's going to be the superintendent who makes that final decision in concert with the mayor and the city leaders. I've had a very good experience in building the budget in Somerville from the high school perspective of being collaborative with the school committee and the mayor. I think there's a lot of similarities between Somerville and Peabody in terms of, I think it's a city that's about to experience a bit of a renaissance. My research has shown that, as the mayor, you were very similar to the mayor in Somerville in terms of being visionary, energetic. You have younger children here. I think that by default, there's an investment in the school district, and I'd like to continue to expand that because I think that it shows a commitment that, to our city from our city leaders. I've also had budget experience in my previous job many years ago with the state. I worked for the Department of Social Services, now DCF, excuse me, where I was responsible for about a $2.4 million group care budget of young people that had to be in either specialized foster care or residential programs. I've also spent the last 25 years on a board in Malden in senior housing. I've been on that project since 1992, where it's a nonprofit. We went from 209 apartments down to 168. We went through just a $15 million renovation several years ago, but that's been budgetary experience that I've had as well.
Thank you, and maybe just so I can have a better understanding in terms of the structure of Somerville, the educational structure, headmaster and kind of housemaster, can you kind of just show kind of what the breakdown is in terms of the structure of Somerville? We have principal and if you can maybe just talk about how it works in Somerville.
Sure. Headmaster is equivalent to principal. Just sounds fancy, I guess, or sounds old.
I actually like it. Yeah, I like it.
It has an old English feel to it, I guess.
Yeah.
So we have 4 housemasters. They're assistant principals. We went with a house system 10 years ago. So they're the same. They're our assistant principals. We used to have them assigned to a class. We redesigned that 10 years ago and didn't do anything fancy. We split the student body alphabetically so that that housemaster and guidance counselor and secretary stayed with them for 4 years. It's been much better. We've improved communication. We've been more of a proactive service delivery rather than reactive. I used to say it's not your father's assistant principal. If I'm calling you as an assistant principal housemaster, it's not necessarily because your kid got in trouble. I want to call them and say, hey, this is what I saw them do. It's great. They made honor roll. Congratulations. So we've re-engineered sort of the thought, the public perception of the position.
Sure. Thank you. Sure. Now we'll open up for questions. I'm going to start with Mr. Rosignol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome.
Thank you.
My first question is regarding Every Student Success Act. Could you elaborate on what that is and how that will impact you as the superintendent moving forward for our district?
What the Every Student Success Act will do in terms of my oversight of the Peabody Public Schools, I come in with a philosophy of every student can succeed. We want to make sure that we're putting our students' needs above everything else, that we're prioritizing in that manner. We want to make sure that whatever, and federal guidelines and acts will come in and change. We need to make sure that our kids are given all the tools to succeed and be successful. We want to make sure that when we are prioritizing our needs, that we're putting the resources that are precious into the most effective way we can. Excuse me. I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question?
It was basically how the Every Student Success Act will impact Peabody going forward.
Right, so that's going to have some curriculum implications that we need to prioritize on. We want to make sure that we are put in a position that we understand what our regulation and regulatory guidelines are. We want to make sure that our students and parents understand that. We want to put our best resources and teacher training towards addressing all of those facets.
One other question regarding what is your feeling on PARC or MCAS 2.0 or whatever you want to call it? So your feeling on either the test in general or standardized testing in general?
You really want my opinion? I'll give it, and I'm not trying to make light of that. They're here to stay. One of the things in which we did in Somerville, prior to me taking it over, I think the high school, we dealt with MCAS and standardized testing like it was radioactive. We kind of said it here. The approach I took was one I probably wish I could impart in a lot of my personal shortcomings, which is embrace it, understand it, and not be afraid of it, the more familiar we became. So I understood that one of the things we needed to do was understand MCAS. It's here. How can we better put our kids in a position? Really, in some of it, I tackled it, of just getting our kids to understand what we're doing. We challenged them. I held, the first year I was headmaster, we had a schedule that actually allowed about 15 minutes a day of sort of directed study. It was really nothing time. And we would call students down and just sort of talk to them. Hey, you got this in the 8th grade. This is what we'd like to see you do. So we really sort of created a culture of challenging oneself, beating the expectations. You made proficient. Do you think you can get to advanced? We've done a good job of addressing MCAS. My personal opinion with Park is I have some problems with it. And I really have problems with it because I think it really penalizes our English language learners. It's timed. I think that that's an immediate penalization of any kid whose first language is in English. I mean, I'm the son of a person with a 10th grade education whose English wasn't his first language. When you speak multiple languages, or English isn't your first language, you're spending a tremendous amount of time translating into your head. And that becomes sort of the anxiety-provoking thing. Another thing we've done is we've really insisted that our kids take their time and do their best. We went from I've really introduced a very active proctoring system, a way in which we have overflow rooms, and kids aren't ashamed of like, okay, that's it, 11 o'clock, we're done. No, we've got a lot of kids that take their time on it. And I don't see that happening with Park. I don't know what MCAS 2.0 is going to do. I think there's also another problem I have with the new version is where it's so electronic. I mean, I got 2 teenage kids. I mean, I got one that will sit there and probably go through it, in a very protracted way, and I got another kid who will just probably click on something, just to move on. And I think that's one of the things we get is that it doesn't become the content of the test, it becomes really the act of taking the test. And I'm a little concerned about that, frankly, but my immediate objection to Park, and I was very vocal with that with our superintendent, was that it penalizes our English language learners. And I think, in the district where 57% of our kids go home and don't speak English, I mean, even though we only have maybe 21% of our kids are ELL kids, more than half of our kids are not speaking English at home. I think that's a real penalty and a disservice to them. So.
Thank you very much. I'll yield at this point to my counterparts.
Thank you, Mr. Rosignol. I'll turn it over to Mr. Amico.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Terry, thank you for being here, and congratulations on your success over at Somerville. Doing a great job over there. Speaking of Somerville, you don't go from a level 3 to a level 1 and maintain that for 5 years now without new instructional methods. So maybe you can elaborate on some of the things that you guys did as a team or that you did to really get your staff up and running and to maintain that success.
Sure. Quite a few things we did. I can tell you one of the things I did was when I took over in that spring, I put a little subtle thing out there is I don't like teachers. I hire educators. And there's a real strong difference, even though I'll use teacher on occasion just so we have a common understanding, but I want people who go above and beyond. I've looked for that in over the 100 educators I've hired during these 5 years too. Content isn't as important as things that I can't teach, passion, a drive, an ability to go above and beyond. We did address a number of the instructional practices, one is which I said, I want to make sure that there's an objective posted and that I have a very simple rule. I ought to be able to go into the room, the kid's grandmother ought to be going into the room, and in 5 minutes know what they're doing. It should be very clear. The objective should be stated, it should be stated during the instruction. Why are we doing this? Okay, remember, we're here to do, understand what the cell looks like when we add this to it. I don't know, I'm making up because it's science and that's not my field. But it should be very clear. We also looked at, in particular with MCAS, why are our kids bombing on math? Well, we had over a third of our kids were coming in and they didn't get a chance to take geometry until junior year. Well, when 30% of the test is on geometry, they're doomed. So we re-engineered that for that group that was sort of high risk. When they came in, we created a 3 math course over 2 years so that they got the algebra, it used to be a 2-year algebra course. We sequenced it so that we did the two algebra and a geometry. Much different there. Excuse me. We also looked at our ELA program. One of my educators, veteran, highly respected, her son was teaching, well, I'll say it's Waltham High School. And they had implemented a program called Writing with Colors. And she came in with my new department head who I hired, who's been really instrumental in this as well, and said, this is what it looks like. What do you think? And I said, I like it because writing is very abstract. And this broke it down. I mean, my younger son is on an IEP, and I looked and I said, this is exactly what would make it click for him. What do you need? They said about $1,500 worth of highlighters. Sold. I mean, first of all, I was surprised that's how expensive highlighters are, but you see our kids tomorrow, the milk carton that goes into every room for MCAS, we got highlighters in there. I mean, they're highlighting with that. So it became a real standard in which they're writing. We started it in the 9th grade. We've pushed it down to the 7th and 8th grades. Not as much as I'd like to. That's one of the things that I really think has been helpful. We've also partnered with a couple groups. This year we've partnered with Landmark to really expand our knowledge of specialized differentiated instruction, really coming up with more sort of a gradual release where the students are doing more of the work and the writing than our teachers. We've also done quite a bit of professional development over those last couple of years with writing across the discipline, writing across the curriculum. But we've done, and we're continuing to. We've implemented a number of ELL strategies that have been really helpful because that was one of our gaps. It still remains a gap, but we're continuing to address it. Put in some programmatic changes as well. And we've had some success, obviously, 4 in a row, hopefully 5 this year, that has been really terrific.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mr. Olympio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Could you speak a little bit about your experience with special education and how it's dealt with it within a budget and students within district and out of district issues that you faced?
Sure. For starters, just as a baseline, I understand and I subscribe to the theory or the tenet of least restrictive setting. I think kids need to be included. You should not be able to go into a classroom and say, well, this is a special ed classroom, with the exception of maybe medically involved kids, which we have a program in Somerville for. I think we know that special education is a major budget killer. I like to subscribe to putting in interventions and strategies that keep our kids in district, that keep them in the least restrictive setting, and that foster, most importantly, student achievement. We've done a lot of team teaching in Somerville. There's a challenge to that. It sounds great, but making it work is a real art. We've done a lot of professional development within that. I also look for, when I hire, as many staff as I can that are duly certified. I think that's a real key. Differentiating instruction is critical. I think that we want to, much like we've done in Somerville, is employ an MTSS strategy, multi-tiered system of support, to do as much interventions at the tier 1 and 2 levels so that our students aren't popping up to the tier 3 that will require additional resources out of district placement, and that's a substantial cost. There are things that we can do systematically to reduce those. I am a proponent of keeping class sizes at the lower grades smaller, because I think that when we get our kids on task and at grade level, I just read a study not too long ago. Third grade, if students aren't at reading grade level, they're 83% more likely to be a dropout. So, we need to put those interventions in place. District-wide, there's a number of strategies I think that we wanted to get up and running beforehand. Head Start, early intervention programs, so we can identify and get some resources and interventions in before they become problematic, more importantly, to the student and to the family, but budgetarily. I also think that, the special education program is one that needs to work in an integrated basis with all the disciplines. I really believe in a collaborative, cross-disciplinary approach. I think that we have to work with our special educators and our content people so that they're both duly trained and duly certified. I'd like to foster that because I think that becomes not only cost-effective, but I think it's more effective when there is one person in the room who understands both sides of that coin.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. My question is in regards to any type of experience you have with collective bargaining, or if not, given your position, how you see the bargaining process working between teachers, administrators, and students.
Sure. I have a fairly lengthy history in collective bargaining agreements. I've personally been in a number of unions. I've been a Teamster, an IBEW worker, SEIU, AFSCME, Moses, then Teachers Association. So I respect the collective bargaining process. I have had a very good relationship with the teachers union. I've been a union president in Somerville of the administrators union. I've done contract negotiations from that side of the table as well. I think the most important thing is communication, being open and honest, hitting things off at the lowest level before they become problematic. You could check with with Jackie Lawrence, the Somerville Teachers Association president. I've had a really good rapport with her. I've worked with the superintendent in identifying issues for contracts. Like I said, I have a great deal of respect for the collective bargaining process. I think that we want to make sure that we do things in a transparent manner, that we look realistically. I think that becomes part of the strategic plan. Everybody wants more, but there has to be some sort of a buy-in in terms of, we can't give you a 12% raise this year as much as I think you deserve it. We need to look at work within our means, but I think establishing a relationship and a rapport with the respective unions in the school district is paramount. Is that what I'm not sure if I completely answered that.
No, you did answer it. Thank you. Just another question in regards to grants. Do you have any experience in obtaining grants?
Yeah, some of us got quite a few grants. We get more grants than, we got a lot of grants. I'm a big proponent of them. We've parlayed quite a bit of that. Actually, getting back to the MCAS, we had, I think for 7 or 8 years running, had an MCAS grant. We were able to do tutoring after school and weekends. I really like them. To me, it's like, it's like the fine mass money commercials. It's out there, let's get it. Usually it's not that much work and compliance with it. I think if it fits the needs in the strategic plan, we do it. I am cognizant of initiative and grant overload. I just don't want to get grants for the sake of getting grants. I think, but when we can identify something that's a priority and a need, and if there's grant money out there, I think we need to pursue that. I also think that needs to be done in concert with the municipal leaders and the mayor and the school committee to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I do like it. I think if we can get grant money to foster student achievement, that's something we do.
And just along those lines, have you obtained them yourself, or are you just familiar with utilizing them?
I've written a couple of them from various perspectives, but we've had in Somerville a grant writer. I've done more of the implementation of it. I think I wrote one when I was a teacher, and I think as a housemaster I wrote one. But you know, I've done that with department heads, our grant writers, central office. We've done it that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Terry, for being here with us tonight. Sure. And just to be clear for the record before we start, you are not the John O'Terry who was a cameraman on Seinfeld.
No, and I'm not there's a John O'Terry in Peabody too.
And there's another John O'Terry in Andover that plays lacrosse at Pace University right now.
That's my nephew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He seems like a talented young man.
Got that from me, I guess. No, yeah, he is. That's my nephew, John. He's a junior down at Pace. Yeah.
Just as a follow-up to one of Ms. Carpenter's questions with regard to involvement in interactive with collective bargaining and various bargaining units,
yep.
What experience, if any, do you have with regard to grievances?
A lot, a real lot. I've heard a number of them. I've dealt with the collective bargaining process and disciplinary actions as well, you know, up to including termination, suspensions. I can tell you, and you know, you certainly more than welcome to vet that, but what I have been told is I do it in a respectful manner. I try to look at it as if that could be me on the other side. You know, no matter how outraged I would be, I think that it's a professional agreement. It needs to be treated as such. But I have heard in 5 years quite a few grievances, both from administrators, secretaries, and the Somerville Teachers Association as well. I've joked with my wife. I've picked up. I used to think I knew law because I taught government and politics, and I used to watch, I think I saw every episode of Law and Order. But in my chair, I've spent a lot of time on the phone and in person with the school district's attorney. So, you know, and that's important. You know, you're not going down that road. It's legal. You need to have legal advice. But yeah, I've got quite a bit of experience with that. Is there something specific you wanted on that?
No, it was just I wanted to know what type of experience you had with that. Not that I don't think there's a lot of grievances going on here in Peabody. Just would be interested in knowing if the superintendent that we hire has some degree of experience. Nothing specific.
Oh yeah. I could show you zip drives of files, but I believe I've gone through it in a very transparent, open manner with both sides. There's been nothing furtive. I've been praised for the manner in which I've done it, both from the other side, from the superintendent, and from everyone else who's been involved. So I think I do it in a professional way.
Switching gears completely, sure. When you were hired as the headmaster in Somerville, there was a little article written, I think, in the Somerville Patch that talked about your work with at-risk students.
Yep.
And an award-winning meditation program to support mediation, excuse me, support student relations and create a culture of cooperation and support. So if you can just elaborate on what that program was, sure, and what motivated you to create it and how
I didn't create it. Oh God, that existed way before me. No, we've used it. I don't know what article that is, but we've had a mediation program in Somerville since the early 90s. We were one of the first, if not the first in the state. Alice Comack is our director. She's been there since the beginning. I have utilized that a great deal. I believe in the process. It's a peer-led mediation program. We develop and train 45 to 50 peer mediators every year. I think we have the capacity to do mediation in about 14 languages right now. We have found that it has been invaluable as a way of keeping peace. When you're in a school, large urban school with 51 languages spoken, there's bound to be some conflicts. If nothing else, something that got misinterpreted. So we've really have relied on that. If anything, I think I've maybe raised the profile and fostered its appreciation. But if the article gave the impression I started that, that's inaccurate. That existed way before me. It has been featured on CNN about 15 years ago. They came in and did a piece on it when our students were given some award and went down to Washington to receive it. So there was a nice piece that CNN did on it. But,
Thank you. I'm going to have two more areas, and then they're hopefully both quick. What is it that you envision, if we were to hire you as the superintendent of Peabody Public Schools, how do you envision your role in our city?
envision the role in the city, did you say? I envision, I think in 5 years, I think we hopefully are looking at a level 1 district and a place in which surrounding communities envy, a place where people want to send their kids, that the prospect of sending your son or daughter to Fenwick or St. John's.
Let me maybe narrow that a little. Your relationship with other department heads, city government, police, fire, first responders, and things like that. Students outside of the classroom and outside of the school day.
Oh, okay. I envision my role much as I think any educational leader does. I have 3 tenets that I think are critical to successful leadership. One is visibility. I think you need to be visible. You need to be at events. You need to be seen by people. You need to be approachable. And you need to be accessible. I would envision my role, if I become the superintendent of schools in Peabody, of being in concert and in lockstep with the mayor and the school committee and setting our goals and priorities and working collaboratively with public safety, the police and fire. I'm not sure how the life support ambulance system goes here, but in Somerville, you know, I work very well with the police, the fire department, and Cataldo Ambulance. I also work very collaboratively with all the other city departments, whether it be Department of Public Health, traffic and parking. When we have an event coming on, we have a lot of complexities like that we have in Somerville, but being visible at events, getting to know these people, having meetings with them, being accessible by the public, by parents, by students, by municipal leaders, and being approachable. So I see it as being an important leader in the city. I think, you know, if the mayor is the general of the city, I want to be that colonel. I want to be the right hand of the mayor. We represent the biggest chunk of the city budget and resources. We represent the future. I mean, I take that task very seriously. I think that's a charge that everybody should take civic pride in within the city, that this is our future and this is what it looks like. And we have a leader who's committed to that and who is willing to stand beside them and has their back as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Terry.
Thank you.
My question is about communications.
I'm sorry?
My question is about communications. Could you give us a description of your communicative style, and if you have any ideas or vision of how you would communicate with all the various people that you would need to communicate with as a superintendent?
Sure. I think, I know communication is critical. I speak Spanish, I get by in French, and I nearly got my teeth punched out in Italy and Italian. So I didn't realize the term I was called growing up when you say it to someone who's not in your family. I was in Florence with my wife, and I can mumble my way through Italian here and there, and I asked the kid for directions, and I thought he was going to kill me. So I think it's important to meet people at their level. Communication needs to be clear. I subscribe to the philosophy, 8 ways, eight times. I communicate a great deal, whether it be through email, newsletters, Connect Ed calls. I think those are critical. I think it's important that communication is regular. It can't be, as I joked, it can't be that puff of smoke that comes out of the Vatican every so often. It needs to be regular. I also do it through social media. I do it through a Twitter account, which I think is okay. I'm not the most social media savvy, but I think that those are ways in which we need to foster outreach. I like a lot of face-to-face communication. I think a lot gets lost sometimes in a text or a tweet. I believe in meetings that are purposeful, that have a direction. In terms of kids, you've got to, I think in order to be effective, you've got to meet people at their level. I think the way in which I talk to a first grade kid is different than I talk to a 12th grade kid. The way I speak with a parent whose English isn't their first language is different from I speak with someone who's maybe an attorney. So I really believe that my communication is excellent. I think it's because I have a great deal of respect for people. I grew up, working class. I never thought that anybody was better than me, and I never thought that I was better than anybody else. And that's part of who I am, that's part of my fiber. But I enjoy people, I love people, I love kids, and I like to talk. I mean, I could go on all night, but I think communication is critical, but it has to be purposeful, it has to be direct. It's one that we want to start at the top so that messages aren't mixed. Is there any other follow-up to that communication? Okay.
No, thank you. That's a very good answer. Thank you.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. A couple further questions, Ms. O'Cherry, that I'd like to ask you. Certainly being in a leadership position for a number of years now, you've been met with many challenges, many difficult moments. Can you maybe talk about a challenging moment in which you were faced with a difficult decision or the handling of a difficult moment, and talk about how you were able to resolve that?
Sure. I had a number of them. You guys can look it up. What we went through in August of 2013, an incident at our sports camp, was certainly one that I think has been the most challenging professional experience of my life. I can tell you what we had was this, there's certain things I can't talk about because there's an active court case, but we had a situation where a student was sexually assaulted. I can tell you when we met the next morning in the mayor's office, we're all sort of tossing about what we need to do, and I said, we need to focus on the victims, and we need to build concentric rings of support around them and work it that way. The police are going to deal with the criminal matter if there is one, which there was, but our focus needs to be on this and communicating with the parents and assuring them that our kids are going to be kept safe and that we're going to see the process through. That was certainly the one that is the most challenging that comes to my mind. I think from a professional standpoint too, one that might not sort of have been as emotionally or psychologically as challenging. We're in the middle of doing a new building project, going through that process with the MSBA, and I know that Peabody has some schools that certainly might be in line for an upgrade or a replacement. Going through that process is very protracted, it's very detail-oriented. I started that as an assistant principal, and last month we were granted it by the MSBA. So those are a couple experiences that come to mind. I think also just the daily management to run a high school, urban comprehensive high school successfully. You've got to understand priorities and needs, and part of my role is to keep things off the superintendent's plate. And, you could check with both of my superintendents that I've been headmaster for. I think they both have been very full of praise in how I've been able to do that, prioritize and handle things. I try to address things at the lowest level. I guess getting back to your question on communication, probably without stating it, I should have said it, communicating with the school committee is paramount for the superintendent. You guys are going to hear stuff. You may or may not have kids in the district system, and you're going to hear it from, a young person's perspective, and you're eventually going to call the superintendent what's going on. I think that proactive, ready communication is really important to keep that from getting legs of its own and all of a sudden becoming a story that's not really a story, that's not factually based. So I think just the daily running of a high school, when you have those complexities, is something that I'm very proud of. That, I go in there every day of what are my priorities, what are my needs. The first thing I need to do is safety. It's keep kids safe. It's not just making sure the ceiling's not falling, or when it rains, it's not a question of, will it leak? It's where is it going to leak today? But I need to keep the school safe emotionally. It needs to be safe for our kids to be who they are. It needs to be safe if they're, an LGBTQ kid, an EL kid. It needs to be safe from bullying. So, that's a daily challenge that I think sometimes we take for granted, but to do it successfully and to do it well and to keep things from bubbling up, I think those are 3 examples that I'd like to point to, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And you touched on this quite a bit in your opening comments about your success in bringing Somerville High School from a level 3 to a level 1. In terms of Peabody and your vision for our city and how you would define success, give me, if you were to move forward with the position, what would you see as success after year 1?
Well, let me also just start by answering that as Somerville is now coming into the Northeastern Conference, and I've had the pleasure this year of, we have monthly principals meetings. I've been working with Mr. Buckley. I've been blessed with, they've had me present a couple of notions and ideas, and Mr. Buckley has been really quick to say, I'd like to learn more about that. So I think coming up here and establishing a good relationship with the principals and educational leaders of the city. I think the first year, I'm going to be honest with you, my first year in Somerville, my superintendent said, this needs to change it, get us out of level 3. I honestly, we stepped into the batter's box and took our best swing. I would have been thrilled if we got up to level 2. Well, we hit it out of the park and got a level 1, and we've been able to do that. But I think some incremental progress, seeing our indicators, they're all pointing northward and not southward or flat, closing some of those gaps, reaching some of the important things that you need to within the CPI of MCAS calculations, which God knows how they're going to recalculate that now because they're adding new measures of accountability, chronic absenteeism, things like that. But I think all of our indicators pointing northward. I think that there also needs to be a qualitative step back. I think that, doing some surveying of where people feel. I've been able to do that in Somerville. I think when you get to a point, you have to look at what people are saying and where do they fit, how do they believe in you, are they buying your message, are they accepting it and working with it. That's difficult leadership, to look at yourself and say, what are we not doing well? I do that every year. Okay, we've got the designation, that's great. What is it that we're not doing well? And work on those things. It's sort of like for a number of years I taught facing history in ourselves, and the history parts is what it is. It's the looking at yourself and identifying your own shortcomings, because that's a course that ostensibly deals with the Holocaust and persecution, but really it's about how people respond to things like that and exposing your own biases. When it's taught correctly, and I think I did it correctly for a number of years, people look and say, I didn't know I had this prejudice or this bias, and now I understand it, and now I can work with this, and I've been enlightened to my blind spots and my shortcomings. So to get back to where is it that we look, I think that we look and we feel more confident. I think good leadership instills that confidence. I'd like to get people shifting out of the mentality of it's hard and we can't to yes we can and we're going to do it. I want to get people shifted out of the mentality of I'm a teacher to I'm an educator. I have always said teachers, I don't like teachers. Rosetta Stone teachers. You can learn a language from Rosetta Stone. we could get rid of the language department. But that's not going to help our kids, because I want someone who's in front of them that will metaphorically take them to a Spanish-speaking culture, can understand and explain the language, can listen to the inflection, the nuances of how they're speaking, and correct them and move them along. But when we come at it from a mindset of we're educating, we're going above and beyond, and people are buying into that, it doesn't become work. It becomes a place where you are called and that our kids follow and our parents are following, and we have the support of everybody, and success will follow. But I really think, in terms of and I do believe in data to an extent, but I understand that, 246 in MCAS, that's a 246, but that's Brian. And what is it that Brian needs to get up to proficient and advanced, and what is it that makes Brian tick? You got a 246, so he's not on our watch list of someone that we need to keep an eye on as to where he's going. But what is it that's going on with Brian? We need to get more of an understanding of our kids. So putting in some changes within the curriculum, how we're doing with instruction, how we're approaching things, I think are going to be ways in which we go northward. Picking the low-hanging fruit that we have within those indicators is important. Getting kids there, that's a big thing. That's my thing today. As I said, we're striving for 100% attendance tomorrow in MCAS. That's going to be something that could ding us down to a level 2 or 3 if we don't have 95% in each one of those subgroups. That's critical. So we've got a full court press going on to make sure that our kids are coming in tomorrow. Not easy when we've got a lot of challenges with our students, but we're doing it, phone calls, texting, whatever it takes. So we want to get those things in place. It needs to be a comprehensive plan, and when those things are starting to point northward and we got people believing in it, we're going to have a great school district.
Thank you. I know Mr. Rosignol had a quick question. I wanted to give him that opportunity.
Thank you. You answered one of my questions, but going back to teachers, and I like the fact that you're saying that you want educators. How do you see technology playing a role in education and enhancing the ability of the educators?
I love technology. I think it's a great tool. I think it makes the possibilities limitless. I think we have to be smart in how we invest in it. If you asked this question 5 years ago, I think almost every person sitting in front of you would say iPads. Now I think that's not necessarily it. I think technology is important to implement. We've done it with Chromebooks at the high school, with carts in there. We're looking at going with the one-to-one device down the road district-wide. We're sort of in the planning stages of that. Maybe at the 6th grade level and start rolling it forward. I think it's dramatically changed how we teach over the last several years. I like the role of technology. I think it's been something that's accelerated and made learning more tangible and not as auditory and abstract for many of our students, whether it be virtual dissections, physics problems, the ability for kids to access the curriculum who haven't been there. Think of a kid who's maybe been hospitalized for a while. The lesson plans can be put up, on Google Classroom, can be done through PowerPoints, Skype. I really think it's opened up a lot. And to be honest, I think that the education world is a little bit behind where the technology is, which is natural. But yeah, I'm a big proponent of it, but I don't put all my eggs in that basket. I think it's another tool that's really critical. I think it helps our kids, particularly kids who are different learners, access and master certain concepts that they couldn't before.
Just as a follow-up, how do you get buy-in from the teachers or the educators to utilize that technology?
How do I get buy-in from that?
So let's say you have a teacher that is a little bit resistant to advancing the technology in their classroom. How would you go about ensuring or getting buy-in from that teacher of a different method?
Sure. Well, we've had teachers who I don't think can open email in the past, so we've taken it from a base level. We've given them one-on-one training. We've put it as expectations within their evaluation and curriculum that I mean, when I go into a classroom, I want to see multiple teaching modalities in there. I think I want to see a little, I've often said, a good classroom lesson looks kind of like a good Little League practice. That, I mean, it sounds simplistic, but there's somebody in front of them that cares about them and is going to keep them safe, right? I mean, if you ever coach Little League, you know, there's bats and balls and, you know, 9-year-olds and God knows where they're going. It's differentiated. Kids are into different stations. You know, maybe 3 or 4 of them over here working on throwing, fielding, hitting. That they're not segregated by ability. That your kid comes out of there a little bit better than when they started. But there's a lot of different things going on. And when I go into a classroom, I like to see a little bit of everything. We've invested in smart boards. I want to see them being used. I mean, they should not be dust collectors up there. So we've done a lot with that. Fortunately, I haven't had much resistance with that, and the ones that we have, we've worked with. You know, I've worked with the union in setting up trainings for them because it's critical. I can't have 3 chemistry teachers using technology and this classroom being shut out of it. So, you know, we've approached it that way. I haven't made it adversarial per se. Try to do it in a professional, supportive manner so that our staff is up to speed on training and everything.
Excellent.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rosignol. Any further questions for Mr. O'Terry? Thank you. This was a great opportunity to get to meet you, get to learn a little bit more about your philosophy and your techniques and things that you want to implement and the success you've had in Somerville. I wanted to give you the opportunity, provide you the opportunity to maybe give us a closing statement, and I'd like to do that now.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you for your time, for listening to me and understanding who I am, what my philosophy of education is, and why I might be the best fit for the city of Peabody to be the superintendent of schools. There's not much more to me than what you see in terms of I'm very forthright, I'm very honest, I'm very genuine. I think that those traits have helped me in the field of education, and I believe that that's something that we sorely lack sometimes when we get up into the upper levels of leadership. I've been really blessed with having superintendents in my district who I think led with their heart and their heads together, that their personal imprimatur and their personal philosophy becomes part of the philosophy and direction that the schools have taken. I'd like to continue to do that at a larger scale. I think I've done a very good job with it at the high school level, bringing it to a district like Peabody that I think really deserves a higher designation from the state, particularly at the high school level. I'd like to make that work. It's a comprehensive high school. That's my strong suit. But also working with the K-8s, or K-5s, and then the middle schools here, of preparing our kids. We sometimes approach things in a backward manner. When we put all of our resources up at the upper end, I mean, I'm just thinking of class sizes. I had a discussion with this the other day, and one of the persons in the room is in a doctoral program, and I said, how many people are in the program and how many professors? Well, there's 2 professors and there's 7 of us. Why is it that we put, you know, these are highly educated, motivated people, and it's a 3.5 to 1 ratio, and, you know, in some districts we've got 26 kids in a kindergarten class. We sort of inverse that. So I would like to be your superintendent to really put a parameter and a philosophy and a passion and an energy into the school district that I believe will propel it to the next level and make Peabody proud. The schools are our future and the students are our future, and I want to make sure that the kids of Peabody get the best education that they can.
Mr. O'Terry, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, councils. I'd like to resume the school committee meeting, and we're very fortunate we have another candidate to interview for the position of superintendent. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Garcia, who's going to be introducing himself in a moment. But Dr. Garcia, my name is Ted Bettencourt. I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of an acoustical problem here. There's a little bit of an echo. But my name is Ted Bettencourt, Mayor of the City of Peabody, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Wigan Auditorium here at City Hall. You've had the opportunity to meet my colleagues on the school committee, and together we'll be asking you a series of questions just to get to know you better. We're very impressed with your resume and very glad to have you here as one of our finalists. As I mentioned to you earlier, I'm going to give you the opportunity to make an opening statement, a couple minutes to introduce yourself, and then we'll get right into questions. When you're ready to speak, I'm going to have you press the green button on the microphone, and hopefully the echo goes away in a moment. But again, very glad to have you here. So why don't I turn it over to you and maybe for an opening statement, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Garcia. I'm coming from Riviera. So this is a very exciting time. And I truly, from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank you for inviting me for such a high position in your city. It's a true privilege and honor to be here tonight, to be interviewed, to know a little bit about your city. I'm sure that you have some thought-provoking questions that you're going to pose, that you're expecting an answer from me. I have been in education for about 23 years, and as a principal, this is my 11th year. I am a student-centered learning leader. Everything I have done in my life is to benefit students, parents, all stakeholders, including teachers, to prepare them to really work with students in the classroom. I've lived in many different countries under different conditions, including Angola, Cape Verde, West Africa, Russia, Canada, and so on and so forth. So my international background, know-how, experience of the trends in education prepares me to tackle the work that is required of a superintendent of schools. That's what I am here for tonight, to share my experience with you, because this is the place of what I want to be. I've done principalship for about 11 years, and I think this is the right time for me to make the move. I'm well established where I am, but I'd like to make the next move, which is to become a superintendent of schools like Peabody, where that is becoming diverse. Just counting, look at your numbers. You have about almost 4% of African Americans. You have Latino kids that are coming into the city. You have about close to 14%. So the city is diversifying, and you need a leader that really embodies that experience, that knows the know-how in terms of dealing with parents, that is well aware of the educational trends, that can really challenge kids and basically prepare them for the 21st century. So with that said, I'm ready for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the first question, Dr. Garcia. I'd just like to get a sense. We, as a school committee now, are in the middle of tackling our school budget. Always a difficult process. It's really a year-round process, but over the next few weeks, we're really going to be delving into the issues regarding our school budget and the improvements that we want to make to it. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak to your experience as an educator, as a principal, your budget experience, what the process is like in Revere, and what type of approach you would take as a superintendent of Peabody.
Sure. I am sure that by the time I am appointed, if I am appointed as a superintendent of Peabody Public Schools, the budget basically, I will inherit a budget that has been approved. That being the case, my job in the first year is basically to look at the budget, look at the line items, and analyze it, try to make sense of it, try to understand it. And it will require a review on my part and my team that I'm going to have to really see the way certain line items have been allocated to either to transportation, either to instructional services, either to special ed, either to out of district placement, either to professional development, instructional materials, equipment, and facilities, and so on and so forth. So my job is to look the way it has been, the budget has been distributed and allocated to different types of initiatives and programs that you have in the district. Then once that is done, that analysis is done with my team, I will have to look and do what's called a program evaluation or a mapping process to see whether the monies that have been allocated to a particular program is justified and is paying off. So there are areas certainly that we can do more with less. I cannot speculate until I see the budget, the way it has been allocated. And my experience with the budget has been at the building level. To answer specifically to your question, every year the budget is centralized by the central office. They give the central office the superintendent. It's a pie. You take that pie, you cut it, you slice it up to every principal within the district, and we manage that budget. So it's basically an operational budget to operate, office supplies, books. There's extracurricular activities also, activities and so on and so forth. But I have managed almost close to almost $4 million as a result of grants that I have written, I have co-authored. Like, for example, the Nellie Mae grant that we have received, which is a 3.5-year grant that is about $3.5 million. And I also have managed other grants that we have acquired, have applied for and secured for my school in the amount of $400,000 to $500,000. So my experience is solid, and also whenever the central office seems to, because the central office is located in the high school, for the former superintendent, Dr. Dakin, and also along with Dr. Kelly, they also contact me and they consult me on a variety of budget issues, and I provide the input that I share my know-how and experience with them. So I have my experience with the budget is pretty solid, and that's the type of experience I will bring. Obviously, at the superintendent level, you have a larger budget, but I'm not the only one controlling the budget. I will have people working with me, and obviously all of the supervisor, even the school committee members, working with me and to make sense of the budget.
Great, thank you. And you touched on this in your comments in terms of grants. Maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on your experience in pursuing grants, managing grants, and the process in Revere. If you could touch on that, please.
Sure. I have great experience writing grants. As I said, because of the work that I have done, implementing personalized learning and student-centered learning approaches, my work has been recognized not only in Revere, but also by organizations like Nellie Mae, the Nellie Mae Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that has been extensively invested in education, innovative technology, student-centered approaches, personalized learning, all these great trends, PBS, which stands for performance-based learning, these new reforms, even the flipped learning and also blended learning, all these reforms basically called their attention. And they came to Revere, they asked me to put a robust proposal together, which I did, and I secured $3.5 million about 3 years ago. That grant has been the cornerstone of my job every single day, because with that grant, I've been preparing my teachers on multiple issues, including student-centered learning, personalized learning, PLP, which is personal learning plans, technology, all these great innovations that are taking place around the country are taking place in Revere. And if it's because of that grant that also we've been invested, we have been actually replicating some of those models happening at the high school within the district as well, at the middle school level and also at the elementary level as well. There are certain models like, for example, the advisory, the PLP, professional learning groups, that basically group of teachers that meet to share best practices twice a week. In other schools, it takes a different form. So because of that grant, our job has been recognized not only in Revere, but statewide and also nationwide. And it's not, you can read my resume, it tells you a lot about myself. We have secured 2 gold medals recently in Revere. We put Revere on the map. And that's the same type of expertise and knowledge and experience that I would bring into the office of superintendent if I'm selected for that position. And
Thank you, sir. Why don't we open it up, and I'm going to start with Mr. Rosignol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start off just asking if what you know and your knowledge of Every Student Success Act, and how do you think that'll impact Peabody if you were the next superintendent? Sure.
so the Every Student Success Act is the act that replaced the No Child Left Behind. But I must recognize that in that act, there are a lot of provisions that come from the No Child Left Behind that's still valid. The only thing that the Every Student Success Act does is that it gives states more flexibility in terms of assessing students. Like, for example, the No Child Left Behind, it was very rigid. Basically was dictated upon the states by the federal government. So the Every Student Success Act gives states more flexibility, and even the Department of Education is kind of neutral in the process. So in my view, that's a progressive measure. It's a progressive that was taken by President Obama that will really give districts an opportunity to look into different types of assessments, including proficiency-based learning is one of them, where basically you allow kids to move at their own pace and time. There's no rush for educators to rush students into taking the testing, when in fact the test is still valid because it's a measure that the state uses to assess student proficiency, but you can also use other things that will enhance the student experience. Like, for example, you can use portfolios which is an authentic measure, way of assessing kids, because it shows growth over time. You can use proficiency-based learning, which is, allow kids to move at their own pace and time, and allows them to master the knowledge along the way. So let's, for example, say that you have 30 students who were not able to take the MCAS or other types of assessment to determine their proficiency. You can certainly argue that proficiency-based learning, because it allows kids more time to learn, it's basically about mastery of knowledge and content rather than an on-demand test. So it allows kids that basically have families, they can go and leave and come and do it. We have a pilot, we have a team of teachers in high school basically implementing this type of assessment. Portfolio, digital portfolio, for example. We have common assessment as well. So all these types of innovative type of DDMs, all these types of innovative types of assessments help us really determine what the child knows and what the child is capable of doing. So I think the Every Student Success Act also, it has a lot of merits because it aligns well also with Common Core. And obviously, I know that here, a few years ago, you guys have a little bit of tension with the adoption of Common Core. I'm aware of that. But I think that, if it's well implemented, there are provisions in the standards. Massachusetts has a very strong very strong curriculum frameworks. So I think that when well implemented, with the right assessment, with the right methodology and pedagogy in the classroom, I think teachers can achieve a lot. And with a good understanding that one size does not fit all, and the use of the Every Student Success Act enhances what we're doing and give us a little bit more freedom, and educators more freedom in terms of, that's what we have been advocating for so long. Give us some freedom so that we can bring creativity, imagination into the curriculum and not impose something on us, because we know the realities of our communities, we know the strengths that our kids are bringing to the classroom, and we know that there are certain knowledge that they bring. Take, for example, an ESL student that comes, for example, from El Salvador. The kid may be well-versed in Spanish. Why forcing the child to take Spanish in the high school when in fact you got the academic language already ready? So you certainly can make the case that the knowledge that the child brings into the classroom can be transferable and it can be validated, and the child does not have to take that Spanish again. In lieu of that, he can take an additional subject to enrich his curriculum. So there are many ways that in fact every Student Success Act can really improve education. I strongly believe in it.
Thank you. You touched on my next question, which was MCAS, Park, and your thoughts regarding that. So you know our thoughts on it. So how do you think that Park is a valuable tool in education?
I think Park is a valuable tool in education because it's all about college and career readiness. And I know that Massachusetts has adopted MCAS 2.0, which basically is not just Park, but it's a combination, it's a hybrid type of test that encompasses parts of Park and part of the traditional MCAS. So I think that it's by amalgamating or by taking part of Park and part of MCAS, that's a nice compromise, because Park has its merits. I mean, it aligns well with Common Core, and the Common Core, let's remember that, since I believe it was 1961 when Lyndon Johnson adopted the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that allocates funds to different states to fund education. Then the No Child Left Behind, came after, and then those standards were not there. So MCAS, No Child Left Behind still has standards, it has accountability, it has all kinds of things. But Common Core has it all, because the goal is to prepare kids to really do well in post-secondary education, also to prepare them for college and career. So Park has all those benchmarks and standards, and I think by compromising, bringing the two tests together, you make it stronger. You are not dismantling what educators in Massachusetts have done for so long, and policymakers, but you bring in some components of Park into it, you make it strong. I think it's a nice compromise, and I think kids, the system will benefit from it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Rosignol. Mr. Olympio?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. What is your experience with special education and dealing with a budget within special education? Also, too, your experience in dealing with students in district versus out of district?
So I looked at your budget. I think you spent a good chunk of money in out of district placement. If I'm not mistaken, you are around $16 million that you spend. If those numbers that I've seen, that I checked with DEC, those numbers are correct, that I think we have to invest in preschool. I think you have, a preschool education here, you have it. But I think one way to really reduce the number of kids who are being outplaced, I think the best way to do is to create programs that really will convince parents that those programs are as valid as the ones that the private schools and other institutions offer. I also know that you guys have here in Peabody, you have a very strong vocational school. You have a very strong AP program. here in the system. I was very impressed when I saw one of the school committee meetings that you guys have had. I saw kids, the student government, presenting to school committee members, talking about all kinds of current events that you have, you have here in Peabody. I was very impressed by it. Just that's aside. But in terms of special education, I think you have to put a robust program in place. You have to have good teachers that really co-plan together, that can deliver a solid and rigorous education in the classroom. You have to have professional development, given to those teachers so that they are current with the special education law, trends, and practices that are out there. You have to have a team of teachers planning together, sharing best practices and sharing experiences, and have an inclusion program in the classroom that really co-taught by two teachers that can really look at that can plan lesson plans, that can deliver lesson plans together, they can assess students together, they can work as a team to really improve the education for our special ed kids in our school, because they deserve the same thing as any other regular student. We also have situations where you have, for example, in Revere, you have small learning groups. And you also have postgraduate students that come. They graduate, but we know that when they do graduate, they don't have they don't have a lot of experience. So we allow them to come back to school and really get maybe another year or two of education to really support what they have learned. We also have life skills program also. I don't know if you have those here in Peabody, but those are the type of things. So my take on that is that if you create a solid, robust, meaningful program in our public schools, then parents will be happy. You have to involve parents also in the process. They cannot be neglected in this process. Listen to them, talk to them, and explain the process. So these are all things that you can do to enhance the image of public schools vis-a-vis the community. So when you do those things, obviously, the results will be better, and parents will be certainly send their children to public schools. But you have to have a program that's well-funded, and that actually, when you do those things, the costs probably will go down, because you have all those things together, it's working well. The costs will go down, parents will be happy, they'll send kids to our school, and I think in doing so, I think the school district will gain a lot. It's a win-win situation on the part of parents, on the part of the school, part of the school system, and also on the part of the community as a whole. So I think that we have to do a better job, either here in Revere or other place. We have to do a better job in our schools to attract parents so that we can reduce the number of number of kids who are leaving our system.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Thank you for being here, for your
problem.
time. My question is in regards to any experience you may have or your views on collective bargaining, how you see that incorporated with teachers, students, administrators.
My view on that is that any collective bargaining has to be fair, and it has to be negotiated in good faith. So by that I mean, we have to be transparent with teachers. They are the ones who are in the classroom every day teaching. And when you are fair, you negotiate in good faith. Negotiating in good faith does not mean that you have to succumb to everything, but you got to be clear, sit down around the table with the union president and negotiate a contract that will benefit all parties. So, and certainly, if you do that, obviously, you'll be able to retain a lot of teachers within the district. Retain teachers by paying them well. And also require some accountability on the part of teachers as well. One of the things that if I'm appointed as a superintendent, what I will do is to review the contract language. I will remove any harmful language that's in the contract that affects the whole theory behind student-centered learning. We know that in many public schools, sometimes you want to reform the school, but there are certain contract languages that impede that development. But that is going to be done. It's going to be a joint venture. And I will have to educate people. I will have to sit down and educate people that don't understand that dynamic very well. And work around changing and reforming the contract language. But my experience with collective bargaining, I have been called upon many times by the superintendent of schools, both Dr. Kelly and Dr. Paul Dakin, to give my input into the negotiation, into the collective bargaining agreement. So even at high school level, I can tell you stories where I was able to circumvent some thorny issues that frequently emerge at the building level. Like, for example, when we implemented the block schedule at the high school, it was a huge move, a huge undertaking that teachers were not prepared for. But I was able to circumvent and convince and improve the understanding that block schedule, advisory, freshman academy, all these huge reforms that I have implemented in Revere would pay off. And I was able to convince the union, and I got the buy-in. So I think that once you are transparent with people and you say, you do what you really promise, no tricks, everything is clear, laid out, you are honest with people, you see people in the eye, and there are areas that sometimes you say, okay, I think this is the way we're gonna go. And you have to put your foot on the ground because there are things that are dictated by the budget that certainly you will not be able to change. But whenever there are areas of compromise, we will compromise. I will not abide by any type of move or approach that will, that basically is going to say, that's going to basically tell the union either take it or leave it. That's not part of my approach. That's not going to be part of my philosophy. My philosophy is to work with all parties to make sure that whatever is on the table is good for the teachers, good for kids, good for parents, and I will also, accountability has to be in place as well. So that's my vision about collective bargaining: transparency, honesty, and negotiate in good faith.
Thank you, Mr. Scarpenter. Mr. Huckman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I try to point out some of the interesting things about each one of our candidates, and you by far have the most interesting education, and you speak 8 languages.
Yes.
Is that right? So just to advance on that a little bit, what took you from West Africa to the Ukraine?
The Ukraine, that's, so I guess I will have to give you a little bit, these will require additional conversations, but I will give you a little bit, history of why. So in 1975, the country became independent. Cape Verde used to be a colony, like, for example, Angola, Mozambique, all these countries. They used to be Portuguese colonies. Cape Verde was one of them. So in the 50s, because of the struggle, because of the many people were not allowed to pursue higher ed, and the country was, many people starved for education, and there was a leader called Amilcar Cabral. So he basically took, he engaged in a armed struggle in Guinea-Bissau, and as a result of that armed struggle in Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde was liberated in 1975, and Guinea-Bissau was liberated in 1974. So as a result of that, the country was without infrastructures. Imagine a country, West Africa, insular, natural resources, no human capital. We used, qualified human capital, no teachers. So we had to, the Cape Verdean government was so desperate in terms of putting a group of people and send them to the Ukraine, where we pursue the higher ed. And in 1975, obviously I was called, in the army. In 1983, I went to Ukraine. I spent 4 years there, pursuing, studying in the military academy. And as a result of, one that was over, I returned to Cape Verde and served in the military for 15 years. I was an officer, and then I decided to become a teacher. So I went to high school, became a geography teacher, and in 1995, my father were already in the US. They petitioned me, and I came to the United States, where I continued to pursue my education. So long story short, There's a lot of nuances to the story, but we don't have time to go there.
So was it that experience that motivated you to start the ROTC at Revere High School?
Correct. That's one, but also that was a motivator, but also I also listened to students. A lot of kids, a lot of students in Revere, they wanted a program like that, and I tend to listen to them. And you know, I'm a good listener, and I decided to put that program together.
You are well regarded in the city of Revere by a lot of people. I see your contract as principal of the high school is extended through 2019.
Correct.
You were the 2014 Revere Journal Man of the Year.
Yes.
And there was an opening for the superintendency in Revere as Dr. Dakin retired. Did you apply for that job?
The answer is no. I did not. And the answer is no because I had a lot of things to accomplish, and I still do. There are a lot of projects involving student-centered learning, involving PLP, involving a variety of things. And, you know, I've been thinking about my next steps, and I'm transparent and very honest with people. I did communicate my decision to Dr. Kelly. Dr. Dakin knows about it. The mayor knows about it. The school committee members, whom I respect a lot, we have a very cordial and professional relationship in Revere. They all know about this. And I have mixed feelings about it. Some of them actually said this is the right time, the right thing to do. Others have mixed feelings about it. But I did not apply for that position because I'm managing almost $4 million in grants. And, you know, right now I can tell you that I brought the school at the level that it can sustain itself. That's the reason why this is the right moment for me to make the right move to the next level.
Your resume that you've submitted with your application is 5 pages long in fairly small font. You've accomplished quite a lot in your life. One of the things that I see is that you're currently a professor at Northeastern University. You've traveled quite a bit to speak at conferences.
Yes.
You get invited to them, it appears frequently. So my question is, how do you, if you were offered the position of superintendent of Peabody Public Schools, how do you envision your role in our community, and what does that mean for some of those other endeavors?
As a principal, you have a little bit more freedom. That's a good question. As a principal, you have more freedom. You are essentially seen as the most senior teacher in the building. So I've got to tell you one more thing. I'm also the speaker for Nellie Mae. I am. They called me to speak at the different conferences about student-centered learning and things we have done. As a superintendent, that freedom will be restricted, or basically I will not have that freedom. I might share best practices that are taking place in my district in Peabody, because one of my goals within this district, if I secure this position, is to put Peabody on the map just the way I did with Revere. Revere was a level 3 school when I got there. As a result of the changes and the structures that I have put together, I elevated Revere High School twice to level 1 school, and we slide into level 2 this past year. And I promised myself that this year we'll go to level 1 again. So that's what I have done, and I will certainly, if invited to, I will, you know, I'm not saying that's going to be something I'm going to do all the time, but once in a while, you know, at the end of the year, I may put a group of educators to go and show who we are as, you know, as a public schools, as Peabody. We have to put the district on the map, but to show that the great things, I've seen things, I've read about you. You guys have tremendous programs within this district. It's just a matter of, I know that level, your high school is a level 3 school. Yes, I can move things around, put teams together and move Revere, the Peabody Public School from the level where it is right now to a better level. I think the educators in Peabody deserve better, and you can achieve better. So I taught at the Northeastern University, and I also taught at UMass Boston, but I'm no longer teaching there right now. I discontinued because of the number of responsibilities, and also probably that's whatever information that is old, of responsibilities that I have, and the devotion that I have for the type of job that I do. So I'm not doing that anymore, not because I lack passion. I have passion for teaching in the higher ed, but I don't have time to do it. I go to school every day. I leave around 9 o'clock, 8:30. I'm a highly committed person. And that's something that I want to be and bring the type of experience and commitment I want to bring to this district. To be visible within the community, work at my full capacity to make this district even greater. So, presenting, sharing best practices, delving into research, show what's out there, illuminating the way, the path. Yes, those things are my passion. But I know that this job is a job that, comes with a lot of responsibility, and obviously I will have to reduce my traveling and reduce the things that I have traditionally done to really, improve the system, work with everyone to make sure that the district continues to flourish and continues to do the great things that you guys have been done all these years.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I've just got a couple of questions for you. As you know, and as you've discussed earlier, Peabody High School is a level 3 school. And in your experience, what would you recommend as the instructional methods that get the best results for not only for MCAS testing, but for the students?
Sure. Good question. So everything starts at the lower grade levels. I'm talking about kindergarten, elementary, kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, elementary, middle school, and high school. You know exactly what I'm going to with this. We have to vertically align the curriculum. If the curriculum is not aligned, there's a problem there, because kids come to other levels with gaps in education. So you have to make sure that the high school folks or high school teachers and administrators, they're talking to middle school, elementary, other levels of leadership. You cannot work in vacuum, and this whole idea, philosophy, working as silos should be thrown out of the window. So you have to work, you have to align the curriculum vertically. By that I mean, you have to make sure that, you have the right mechanisms to really determine whether the standards are being met or not at each level. So at the high school level, what I did basically that has been replicated throughout the district was that the first thing that I noticed at the high school level is that the type of schedule that I had was 7-period schedule, 7 periods a day of 50 minutes. Every single day you have 7 periods. You can imagine the amount of movements in the building with the loss of instructional time that's taking place at the high school level. So what I did basically, I delved into the research. I looked into modular schedule, which is also called 4x4 schedule, where kids have 4 chunks of time, 4 periods of time, but those times are extended learning times of 80 minutes. What that time does for educators is that, if it's well implemented, is that it allows kids to really engage in a more inquiry-based projects. They have more time to do homework. They have more time to study. They have more time to argue and counter-argue with teachers in the classroom. They have more time to teachers have more time to differentiate instruction. Teachers have more time to really identify kids who are struggling in the classroom. Teachers have more time to really scaffold instruction in the classroom, sitting with kids, finding out what's wrong with you, why you are not performing well. You have to bring yourself down to that level where the child is, meet his needs where he is. That's the first thing we did. So the second thing we did with that is that we also implemented an advisory period, which runs 3 times a week. Advisory is a time for teachers and students to develop personalized learning approaches, which is develop good relationships. I've been telling educators for I would say for my entire life, everything starts with good relationship. If you don't have good relationship with kids, you will not be able to teach. So we invest heavily in advisory. It's a period of the day where teachers and students meet. They talk about current events. They talk about all kinds of things. It's a way of really bringing the two agents of learning, teaching, and learning together so that they can know each other, where each other is, and provide each other support. The teacher provides teachers support, and teachers get to know better their children, where they're coming from, the lack and the gaps that they have, so that those gaps can be met successfully. The third thing that I did, we know that kids come from middle school, other levels of leadership, and they have a lot of anxiety. Transition from middle school to high school is a major issue for many kids. It's a major issue for regular, mainstream kids who are born and raised in this country, never mind kids who came from other countries, like ESL kids. So you have to have a comprehensive transition program in place, like the Freshman Academy, where you have a cadre of teachers that work with students every day. They plan together, they know the gaps, they share, students, they talk about students during common planning time, and they discuss the progress of a child. That's the type of personalization you want in a building. The fourth thing we did was to create a space in the schedule where teachers maintain good dialogue and conversation 2 times a week, twice a week. They meet on Mondays and Tuesdays for 39 minutes a day. They discuss good planning, good lesson plan. They discuss strategies. They discuss student work. They look at student work. They see what's good, what's not good, the gaps that kids have, how a particular teacher dealt with a particular issue, and learn from each other. We also created what's called peer observation, where teachers share best practices by visiting each other. Those things have to be done in a very, needs to be done, and you have to create protocols for those things, create norms for those things. Those things can be very intimidating if teachers don't know how to implement it, if they don't understand it, because they're gonna see, okay, Lorenzo Garcia is coming to Mr. Mayor's class to observe a class, and basically is gonna look at my teaching and criticize me. That's a way. There is a mistrust among teachers. Sometimes in education we say, well, educators, teachers don't trust administrators. But if there's one place where there's a big mistrust, is among teachers. And that trust needs to be built and created. So that needs to be done in a meaningful way. You have to create norms, protocols in place, and you have to have facilitators also that can facilitate that type of conversation with an agenda, summaries that are written on a monthly basis, shared with all faculty members about things that people have discussed, where we are in the process, things that we have discussed, things that we have yet to discuss. So those are the type of things that we have done, and that created a culture of a trust, not only among teachers, but also among teachers, administrators, and staff in general. You go to Revere High School, you go into the district. Revere Public Schools, believe it or not, is a very progressive idea, progressive district. And I'm sure you guys are progressive as well. So what I'm saying is that you have to create a culture that supports good teaching and good learning. And at the high school and at elementary and the middle school level, you have to create also teams that analyze the data, that disaggregate the data, use that data to create common assessments, to guide instruction. Common assessments based on MCAS, all the type of assessment kids have taken, and of course assessment. Those are things that really will guide good instruction and good learning in the classroom. You have to have coaches also that are capable of disaggregating the data, share the data with the faculty, okay, at the faculty meeting, during PLG time. Those are things that you have to put in place. Obviously, it will take baby steps. It's not something you're gonna bring at once. These are incremental steps that you can take that will lead you to better results. So those are the type of things we have done in Revere that has paid high dividends at the high school level. It's a Rivera as a whole is a District 2 level. I mean, it's a level 2 district. So you guys, Peabody is doing well. You got 8 elementary schools, you have 1 middle school and 1 high school. So all elementary schools and middle schools are level 2 and level 1s. So high school also can be a level 1 or a level 2. I truly believe in that. It's just a matter of structuring things properly and do 2 things. One is the vertical alignment of the curriculum. The other thing is to align the curriculum horizontally to make sure, social studies teachers have common assessment, that they can share, they can spread, they can use the same things. English teachers, the same thing. Math teachers, the same thing. It's about creating that culture that support teachers with PD. When we did the block scheduling in Rivera, for example, we got to invest a tremendous amount of money into professional development, concretely, specifically, into ways in which teachers can deliver instruction at 80 minutes of instructional time, because it's a long time. Moving from 50 minutes to 80 minutes is a long time. If right approaches and methodology and pedagogy are not properly used, system of assessments are not properly used in the classroom, that can be counterproductive, because technically kids will lose track of learning and they will engage in types of behavior that is non-academic, and that's not something you want. So you have to invest in your teachers with PD, professional training on a variety of strategies so that they can do a better job. So I think you have a very strong school system, and I have a lot to bring into your school system based upon my experience. I work in Rhode Island, and Revere in Rhode Island have done some amazing things there, and Revere, that's exactly where I have engaged in a type of leadership that is shared, that teachers really believe in it, and that really has been an uplifting, not just to Revere High School, but also for the entire district. There are structures that I have put in place at the Revere High School that have been replicated throughout the district. Professional learning groups is one of them, advice is another one, diverse, the coaches, the MSTV, the Making Student Thinking Visible. How powerful that course offered through RBT. So that's another thing we have been doing in Revere, starting this past year. The text-based writing, also allowing kids the digital literacy, the flipped learning with iPads, introduction of iPads and Chromebooks lately. It has been a lot of things on the plate, but teachers have bought into it because they have seen concrete results. Look at our AP scores. This year we have outperformed the state. Look at the scores. Look at the scores on the AMCAS as a whole. So I think my experience says it, I don't have to justify myself. All I can say is that I would bring the same zeal, I would bring the same experience, the same leadership qualities to a district like this, so that we can bring this district to a new level, so that we can improve the teaching and learning in this district and support our teachers, the wonderful teachers that we have, to improve the teacher morale and to teach and to improve the performance of the district as a whole. I cannot wait to see Peabody High School moved out of that level, and I'm eager to start.
And just one additional question. How would you characterize your communication style, and are there any types of specific communication methods that you would use as a superintendent in this district?
I am, as a leader, I am a pragmatic leader. I am a doer. I like research to illuminate my path, where I want to go, but I don't get bogged down on research. I am a very pragmatic person, and people already know me in my school. They know know me very well in my district. I like things to be done. I know that this job at this level, there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of conversation, things that need to take. I'm aware of that, and I can do that. My leadership also is, I believe in collaborative leadership. I don't believe that one person can do it at all. I believe that people, when they work in teams, amazing things can happen. And I'm a progressive person. I like innovation education. I love technology. I also believe that you have to provide teachers with a space for dialogue. When they need to voice something, let them do it. I'm not the owner. To be honest with you, I don't claim to know everything. I am a learner, let's put it that way. I make an effort to learn every day. And whenever I see best practice happening out there, I become starved. I want to learn it. And when I learn it, I want to share it with my colleagues. I also want to learn from my colleagues. If somebody comes to me with a good idea, I want to listen. I'm a good listener. And I want to filter the information through and have a conversation with people until I get it. I think that education is a free enterprise. People should be allowed to express their opinion because that's the only way we can grow together. It's not about shutting people down that you're going to progress. It's by really creating a space for dialogue, conversation, meaningful conversation that will take you somewhere. When there are times that I need to exercise an assertive leadership, that time comes. But I give people opportunity to express themselves and to really bring good ideas to the table so that we can really, filter, what the type of ideas that will be beneficial for students, the ones that are not beneficial, and delineate a strategic action plan that will allow me to implement the vision for the district and the goals that the district has outlined for its children, parents, and the entire community as a whole.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. It's been a great opportunity to learn about you. I've appreciated your answers about your background, your educational philosophies. I wanted to give you the opportunity, maybe a couple of minutes, to kind of summarize your interest in the city of Peabody and what you think you could bring to our community.
So as a superintendent of schools, I will bring the same commitment, the same zeal, the same expectation that I have for my staff, for my teachers, for my leadership team to the district. One of the things that I have not talked about here is the whole idea behind the community involvement. I've done great things in Revere in terms of mobilizing parents and involve them in the process. I created a community school because I do believe in community schools as a vehicle to educate parents, because if we do educate parents, there will be a direct correlation between what parents know in their children. They are able to educate their children. They can support them with the homework. They can do a variety of things with their children. I have created a community school. Right now, I have created what's called a Parent Leadership Institute in Revere, where we have every week we have about 16 parents coming and meeting and discussing a wide range of issues about their children. It's all about empowering parents, making sure they know, they understand the system so that they can support their children. Since I got there, the number of parents participating, getting involved, engaged in education is just tremendous. It's just unbelievable what's happening there. So, as I said, if I'm offered the position, I will bring the same predisposition, the same talent, the same devotion to this school district, because I think that you deserve it. Your population is diversifying, it's become more diverse. I know you asked me a question about my linguistic skills, I gave it to you. I not only know language, but also know the intercultural variations among different groups. I know my way about interact with different groups, and I think I have a lot to offer to this district. In addition to all the reforms, all the things that I have done in Revere that will enhance education in this district. So I truly, truly, truly appreciate the fact that you gave me the opportunity to be here tonight. It's an exciting moment in your town, in your school district. I know that you have interviewed several candidates. I'm the last one. All I can say is that I wish you best of luck in finding the right candidate for your district. But I believe that I have all the qualifications to really, support your district and take it to a different level. So thank you for the opportunity. Very exciting about the position, and hopefully I will start soon. Thank you.
Dr. Garcia, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.